Welcome to Factual America, where truth and hard evidence come first. Today, we're exposing one of the most controversial subjects in modern American governance, the weaponization of the IRS against everyday citizens like you and me. Is the IRS truly a neutral tax agency, or has it become a powerful political tool used to punish dissent, control opposition, and squeeze Main Street Americans? Buckle up because you're about to hear stories, evidence, and twists that the mainstream media refuses to cover. Let's start by understanding the origins of the IRS. The Internal Revenue Service was created to fund the Civil War back in 1862, but its power exploded with the ratification of the 16th Amendment in 1913, which gave the federal government a constitutional right to collect income tax. What began as a mechanism for economic stability has, some say, morphed into an institution capable of political intimidation and economic strangulation. Fast forward to the 21st century, and you'll find a pattern of alleged IRS abuse that goes far beyond paperwork and audits. From the infamous targeting scandal during the Obama administration to the new army of IRS agents funded by record-breaking budgets, there are growing concerns that the IRS isn't just about collecting taxes, it's about collecting power. The first big twist? The IRS has been used as a political weapon by multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat. In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon infamously ordered IRS audits on his political enemies, according to White House tapes released during the Watergate scandal. Congressional investigations later revealed the extent of the abuse, and reforms were promised. Yet, did these reforms actually solve the problem? Many Americans thought that could never happen again. But in 2013, the IRS was back in the headlines, this time accused of unfairly targeting Tea Party and conservative groups applying for tax-exempt status. Many conservative organizations waited years for approval or were denied altogether. Emails between IRS officials referenced pressure from above and procedures seemingly designed to frustrate conservative activism. Here's where things get personal. Take the case of Catherine Engelbrecht, founder of True the Vote. Her application for tax-exempt status triggered a wave of audits, not just from the IRS, but also from the FBI, ATF, and OSHA. Was this just a coincidence or deliberate intimidation for stepping into the political arena? Regardless of where you stand politically, the message is clear. Crossing certain lines invokes the full machinery of the federal government. And when it comes to the IRS, that machinery can mean years of legal headaches, financial ruin, or worse, public humiliation. Now ask yourself, if it can happen to them, could it happen to any of us? Let's zoom out for a moment. What does the Internal Revenue Service actually know about you? Your income, your spending, your charitable donations, your medical expenses. Every corner of your life is laid bare on those forms. Privacy advocates warn that vast amounts of personal data, if wielded improperly, can become tools for blackmail, selective enforcement, or even political sabotage. In recent years, Congress has approved massive new funding for the IRS, with promises to hire tens of thousands of new agents. Supporters argue it's to catch wealthy tax cheats. Critics, however, point out that historically, audit rates for middle and lower income Americans have sometimes outpaced those for the wealthy. Will this new wave of enforcement hit the elites, or will it crush small business owners and working class families? A surprising twist. A ProPublica investigation recently revealed that the top 1% are often able to exploit loopholes in complex tax shelters so effectively that they escape scrutiny altogether, while small business owners and normal wage earners face more frequent audits. Is this by design, incompetence, or a convenient side effect? Let's pause here to consider. In theory, federal agencies like the IRS are supposed to be impartial and above politics. But as the IRS's own Inspector General uncovered in several reports, internal controls have failed time and again, and accountability is rare. Combine this with the sheer complexity of the tax code, and you realize how easy it could be for someone with the right motivation to target their enemies, slow walk approvals, or turn random audits into a form of payback. It makes you wonder, how feasible is it as an American to protect yourself from this kind of overreach? The average citizen doesn't have an army of lawyers or a PR firm. They have their family, their accountant, and the hope that the system is fair. But history and the headlines tell a different story. The chilling effect is real. Think of all those who might hold back from donating to a controversial cause, running for local office, or criticizing a federal policy. simply because they're scared of getting the IRS's attention. Our First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech and association. But if government power can be quietly unleashed behind the scenes, are we really free to speak our minds? Now, you might be wondering, surely Congress and the courts would step in? While there have been hearings and settlements, many victims of IRS overreach find themselves alone, outgunned, and facing steep legal bills. And when the media does cover these scandals, they often frame it as bureaucratic incompetence, not deliberate weaponization. Sometimes the IRS's reach defies simple explanation. Take the recent case where journalist Matt Taibbi, who reported on government censorship, happened to be visited by IRS agents at his home on the very day he testified before Congress. Was it a bureaucratic coincidence or a warning shot? Nobody in the federal government has offered a convincing explanation. Then there's the new frontier, data leaks. In 2021, the private tax returns of America's wealthiest citizens were illegally leaked to the press. Some say it was whistleblowing, others see it as a targeted breach intended to influence policy debates and vilify political opponents. Either way, it underscores a troubling truth. The IRS knows everything, and your information isn't as secure as you might think. Remember Lois Lerner? As head of the IRS's Exempt Organizations Division, she was at the center of the 2013 scandal. Lerner pleaded the Fifth Amendment and refused to testify before Congress. No one went to jail. Is it any wonder so many Americans distrust the system when abuses go unpunished and accountability is nowhere to be found? Here's another angle you probably haven't heard, the ripple effect. When the IRS is politicized, trust collapses, not just in the agency, but in the entire system of government. Voter turnout drops, civic engagement withers. We end up with a nation where people feel powerless, cynical, and disconnected from their own country. Of course, the defenders of the IRS argue that these are just isolated incidents, not evidence of a systemic problem. But every time a new revelation comes out, a journalist audited, a nonprofit targeted, or a tax leak used as ammo in a political fight, the argument gets harder to swallow. At some point, patterns matter more than denials. Let's look at the numbers. Over the past decade, IRS audits have increasingly targeted low-income Americans. According to Syracuse University's TRACK project, taxpayers earning less than $25,000 were audited at 5 times the rate of everyone else in 2022. Yet these are the very people with the least resources to defend themselves. How did we get to a place where the poor are more likely to be scrutinized than the powerful? Some supporters of expanded IRS enforcement say we need to close the tax gap, the difference between what is owed and what is collected. But as more resources are poured into enforcement, watchdog groups warn that the line between collecting what's owed and harassing innocent Americans grows ever thinner. Ask yourself this: if you got a letter from the IRS tomorrow, would your first reaction be confidence in the system? Or would it be fear? Fear of mistakes, fear of costs, and fear that you've become a target for reasons you'll never fully understand? For millions of Americans, their relationship with the IRS is an uneasy truce at best. And as our tax code grows more complicated, now tens of thousands of pages, ordinary Americans face more opportunities for mistakes. Some of these are honest errors, others stem from the confusing, ever-changing regulations. The more complicated the code, the easier it is for the IRS to find something, anything, that justifies further scrutiny. One final twist: what about religious groups, political activists, and grassroots organizations? Historian David Dallin documented how, in the 1960s, the IRS initiated audits of civil rights groups like the NAACP and even religious leaders who challenged the establishment. This wasn't about left or right, it was about controlling dissent and stifling movements that threatened the status quo. So what's next? Congress is once again debating reforms, promising new oversight, and pledging to ensure that the IRS never becomes a tool of intimidation again. But as history proves, reforms only work if there's a will to enforce them, and if American citizens refuse to let the watchdogs fall asleep at their posts. Let's not forget, none of this is just theoretical. For every headline, there's a real person, a family, a business that's been devastated by misuse of federal power. This isn't about hating taxes. It's about demanding fairness, accountability, and limits on those who wield the greatest tools of coercion. Let me leave you with this question. Is the IRS just an overworked bureaucracy, or is it a political weapon hiding in plain sight? The evidence suggests a pattern that's hard to ignore, and as always, it's vigilant. everyday Americans who pay the highest price. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the weaponization of the IRS here on Factual America. I want to hear from you. Have you or anyone you know ever had a run-in with the IRS that felt less about tax law and more about silencing or intimidation? Let us know your story in the comments below. And what other government overreach stories or accountability investigations do you want us to tackle next? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want to see more content that digs into the facts that matter most to real Americans.